The soft morning light came through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, but Kate Middleton was already awake. She had been up since 5, her heart heavy, her thoughts racing. On the outside, it was just another royal day. There was a gown waiting, a car prepared, cameras ready. But inside her heart, everything felt different. Today she was going to the Children's Hope Foundation Gala, one of the most important charity events of the year. It would be held at the Royal Opera House, full of famous guests, wealthy donors, and reporters. Kate had attended events like this many times before. She knew how to smile, how to say the right words, how to carry herself like the perfect princess the world wanted her to be. But this time, she would be going alone. Prince William had been called away last night for urgent state business. Now all eyes would be on her. As Kate sat at her dressing table, looking at her reflection, she didn't see strength. She saw tired eyes and a fake smile. Her emerald green gown was beautiful. It had been designed especially for this event, and it fit her perfectly. Her earrings once belonged to Princess Diana, and they sparkled softly against her dark hair. She looked elegant, but she didn't feel it, not today. For weeks now, Kate had been feeling the pressure more than ever. Every move she made was watched and judged. The world loved her at least, that's what they said. But she had also seen the cruel comments online. People who didn't know her wrote harsh things about her looks, her voice, her parenting. When she couldn't sleep, she thought about those words and felt her chest tighten. No one ever talked about how hard it was to be strong all the time. The knock on the door broke her thoughts. Her assistant's voice was soft. "Your Royal Highness, the car will be ready in 30 minutes. Kate nodded quietly and stood up. She smoothed down her dress and took one last look in the mirror. She was supposed to look perfect, but she didn't feel perfect. She felt like a woman carrying the weight of a crown in the silence of her own heart. The ride to the Royal Opera House was quiet. London passed by in a blur. Kate stared out the window, thinking about what she would say tonight. Her speech had been carefully written by her team, filled with polished phrases about the importance of charity, the future of children, and royal duty. But the words felt distant, like they didn't belong to her. When she arrived, the cameras flashed instantly. Crowds cheered. Reporters called her name. Kate smiled, waved, and walked gracefully into the building. She had done this 100 times before, yet tonight felt heavier. Maybe it was the silence inside her. Maybe it was the feeling that something had to change. Inside, the ballroom glowed with gold lights and crystal chandeliers. Tables were set with white cloths, shining silverware, and name cards for every guest. People stood in elegant clothes, chatting, laughing, drinking wine. Kate moved through the room like a queen, polite and graceful. She shook hands with politicians, greeted celebrities, and posed for pictures. But her heart wasn't in it. Then something caught her eye. In a corner of the ballroom, the quieter tables were people who didn't look like the wealthy donors. They were families, parents, children. Some wore simple clothes. Some looked nervous. Some looked like they didn't quite belong. These were the families the Children's Hope Foundation had helped. People who had faced terrible struggles, loss, illness. Furand found strength again with support from the charity. Kate made her way to one of the tables and sat beside a teenage boy named Jaime. His eyes were kind but tired. He told her that he used to struggle with anxiety so bad he couldn't leave his house. But now, thanks to therapy, he was learning to face his fears. And tonight, he was here, speaking to strangers. Sharing his story, Kate was moved. She spoke to more families. One mother told her how she had nearly lost her daughter to depression and how the foundation gave them hope when they had none. Another father spoke about addiction, pain, and healing. These were not easy stories, but they were real. They were full of courage, and they made Kate feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Connected. Suddenly, the speech in her bag felt cold and lifeless. It wasn't right. These people weren't just names or numbers. They were survivors, fighters, humans with real stories, and she was one of them. The music was soft, the laughter light, but Kate's heart was louder than it had ever been. As the evening continued, she didn't return to her seat at the head table. She stayed near the back, near the people whose voices were finally being heard. She watched something she had never seen at a royal gala. Before families once helped by charity were now standing tall, speaking to the very donors who once gave in silence. Jaime, the teenager who had spoken to her earlier, was now standing in a small circle of businessmen, explaining how therapy had helped him with his anxiety. His voice didn't shake. His eyes were steady. He wasn't begging. He wasn't broken. He was showing them the power of being heard, of being helped, of being human. Kate stood still for a moment, watching. Her fingers tightened gently around her glass. These people were not hiding in the background like she had expected. They were speaking up, not for pity, but for pride. Their stories weren't about weakness. They were about strength. They weren't asking to be rescued. They were showing how they had rescued themselves with support, with love, with belief. Margaret Thompson, the foundation director, returned to Kate's side, her voice calm and warm. "This," she whispered, "this is what I love most about this night. When people stop pretending and they meet each other as equals." Kate nodded slowly. She felt something rising in her chest, something deep, something difficult to name. It was admiration. It was sorrow. It was truth. And it left her speechless. As Margaret moved on to speak with another guest, Kate stood still, lost in thought. The gala was beautiful. The chandeliers glowed, the food was rich, and the dresses sparkled. But the most beautiful thing in the room was invisible. It was courage. And Kate felt like her prepared speech didn't belong in this room anymore. Her words had been safe, polished, perfect. But tonight wasn't about being perfect. It was about being honest. She turned to Margaret once again, this time with hesitation. "May I ask you something?" she said softly. Margaret paused, sensing something serious. "Would it be all right if I changed my speech tonight?" Margaret raised her brows, surprised. "Of course, Your Royal Highness. What would you like to say instead?" "I'm not sure," Kate replied honestly. "I just know. What I wrote doesn't feel right anymore. I've been listening all evening. These families, they've changed me. I don't want to stand up there and just say words. I want to speak from my heart." Margaret touched Kate's arm gently. "Then do it," she said with a smile. "Speak from your truth. That's what people will remember." As the moment for her speech grew closer, Kate sat quietly at the edge of the ballroom. The orchestra continued to play softly. People laughed. At their tables, and dessert was being served, but inside Kate the world was turning. She felt nervous in a way she hadn't in years. She had given hundreds of speeches before, but always with notes, with structure, with perfect timing. This time, she would speak without any of that. She would speak from a place that had never been allowed to show in public before. Her name was called. The applause was warm and respectful. Margaret's voice announced her as a champion for children's hope, and the room clapped as Kate walked slowly to the podium. Her steps were quiet, her breath careful, but her heart was full. She looked out at the sea of faces: politicians, celebrities, donors, staff members, families, children. They were all watching her. And for the first time, she didn't feel above them. She felt like one of them. "Thank you," she began, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you for being here tonight. I had prepared a speech, but after everything I have heard this evening, I've decided not to give it." A few people in the crowd shifted, surprised. Kate continued, "I thought I was coming here tonight to help raise money for a good cause. But I've learned that this evening is not just about money. It's about people. It's about stories. It's about healing." She paused, her hands resting gently on the podium. "I've spoken with families tonight who have faced deep pain, and yet they stood here with strength and dignity. I've listened to a young man speak bravely about his anxiety. I've seen children who once felt invisible stand proudly and share their truth. And I realized these stories are more powerful than anything I could write down." The room was growing still now. Kate took a breath, looked down for a moment, then raised her eyes again. "These families taught me something I didn't expect. That the strongest people in the room are often the ones who had every reason to give up, but didn't. And tonight, I'm not standing here as a princess trying to be perfect. I'm standing here as someone who has been deeply moved and changed. There was a quiet stillness in the room that did not feel ordinary. As Kate stood behind the podium, it felt like the entire world had paused. Not a fork clinked, not a chair moved. All eyes were on her, not just out of respect, but out of deep connection. For the first time in years, Kate wasn't giving a royal speech. She was speaking from her heart. Her voice trembled at first, but it slowly grew stronger. Tonight I have listened. I have watched. And I have felt something I cannot explain. The stories shared here are not just sad stories. They are stories of bravery, of survival, of hope. She paused and looked toward the back of the room where families from the foundation sat. Many of them had tears in their eyes, but they were smiling too. Kate saw Jaime and his mother sitting close together. She spoke again, her voice softer but clear. I met a boy tonight, Jaime. He told me that asking for help used to feel like failure. But now he knows it's a sign of courage, Kate felt. Her throat tightened. She didn't want to cry, but she didn't stop herself. Not this time. She let the emotion rise and fall with her words. I've also learned something about myself tonight, she said gently. There have been moments, many of them, when I've asked myself if I'm strong enough for this life, if I'm doing enough, if I'm helping anyone at all. I've smiled in front of cameras when I wanted to be alone. I've said the right words when my heart was breaking. There was no noise. The silence in the room became its own kind of support. I've felt pressure to be perfect, she continued, looking out across the room. But tonight has reminded me that perfection is not what people need from us. What people need is honesty, vulnerability, truth. The audience wasn't just listening anymore. They were feeling every word. Businessmen who had spent the evening talking about numbers were now wiping away tears. Politicians were no longer checking their phones. Even the photographers had lowered their cameras. Kate placed her hands gently on the podium. I want to tell you about someone else. Little girl I met at the foundation last year. Her name was Emma. She was 8 years old. She didn't speak, not to anyone. She sat alone, afraid and quiet, hiding from the world. Her voice began to shake slightly, but she continued. The counselors didn't force her to speak. They just sat with her. Day after day, they waited. They showed her kindness. They showed her she was safe. And after months, she finally spoke. Kate took a deep breath. Her eyes glistened as she recalled the moment. She said, I thought nobody would like me if they knew how scared I was inside. A quiet gasp came from somewhere in the room. Kate gave a small nod, holding back her tears. That broke my heart, because that fear, I know it. Many of us do. Try to hide the parts of ourselves we think are too broken, too scared, too real. Her voice steadied again. But what if we stopped hiding? What if being honest about our pain helped someone else feel less alone? What if showing our true selves made others brave enough to do the same? She looked at the audience with a kind of strength she hadn't shown before. Not the strength of a polished princess, but the strength of a real woman. I want to make a promise to you tonight, Kate said. I promise to stop pretending. I promise to be honest about my struggles. Because I believe that truth can help. More than perfect words ever could. From the back of the room, one of the foundation staff members let out a quiet sob. Another reached over and held her hand. The emotion was growing, spreading through the audience like warmth. Kate looked at the families again. You have taught me something tonight. You have taught me that courage is not loud. Sometimes courage is sitting quietly with your pain and still choosing to speak. You have reminded me what it means to be human. Her words were not rehearsed. They were not written on paper. But they came from a place so deep and real that no script could match it. And the people in the room knew it. I'm not just here to thank you for your stories, Kate said. I'm here to say thank you for reminding me of mine, for reminding me that behind every title, behind every crown, there is a person who still needs to feel seen, heard, accepted. The room was silent, not out of formality, but out of awe. Kate had stopped being a royal figure and become something much more powerful, something real, and everyone in the room felt it. The room was completely still. No one moved. No one spoke. Kate had finished her speech, but she didn't say thank you or step away from the podium. She simply stood there, overwhelmed by emotion. Slowly, she lowered her head. Her shoulders dropped. Her hands gently rested on the sides of the podium, and for a few long seconds, she couldn't look up. Her heart was full. She had said more than she ever thought she would. She had shared her truth. She had opened her heart to the world, and then something happened that no one expected. One by one, people began to stand. It started with Margaret Thompson, the foundation's director. She rose slowly from her seat, her hands shaking slightly, tears shining in her eyes. Then Jaime and his mother stood. Then more and more people across the room began to rise. Parents, children, donors, volunteers, guests in expensive suits, even royal staff. But no one clapped. They simply stood. In silence. It was not the silence of discomfort. It was the silence of respect, of honor, of something sacred. Kate could feel it. She raised her eyes slowly and looked around. An entire ballroom filled with people of every kind was standing. For her, not for her crown, not for her title, but for her honesty. And they stood in complete stillness. Tears streamed down Kate's cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. She didn't hide. She stood tall in that silence, wrapped in something stronger than applause, wrapped in the power of shared humanity. For a few long moments, no one spoke. Then, slowly, Margaret began to clap. Just once, soft, careful. Jaime followed, then Sarah, then others. But even as applause filled the room, it remained gentle. It wasn't loud or proud. It was tender. It's like a whisper of thank you. It's like a hand over the heart. Kate stepped back from the podium. Her feet moved slowly, almost unsure. She didn't walk like a princess leaving a stage. She walked like a woman who had just opened her soul to the world and found that it was okay. As she returned to her seat, people reached out to her. Some touched her hand, some smiled through tears, and others simply looked at her with wide, grateful eyes. No one said a word. They didn't need to. The message was clear. They had witnessed something rare, something real. Back at her table, Kate sat down quietly. She felt light and heavy at the same time. Light because she had finally spoken her truth. Heavy because it had taken so long. A moment later, Jaime walked up to her with his mother by his side. He looked nervous, but proud. "Thank you," he said, his voice quiet. "I didn't think someone like you could understand someone like me, but you do." Kate smiled, tears in her eyes. "I do," she said, "more than you know." Sarah reached for her hand and squeezed it. "You didn't just give a speech tonight. You gave us your heart." Kate nodded slowly, gave me mine back. As the evening went on, people began to talk again, but everything felt different. Walls between rich and poor, between powerful and ordinary, had fallen away. People hugged, they cried, they spoke from their hearts. It was no longer just a gala, it had become a gathering of human souls, connected through truth and compassion. That night, back at Kensington Palace, Kate stood alone in front of her bedroom mirror. She was still in her emerald green gown, but she didn't look at the dress. She looked at her eyes. And for the first time in a long time, she saw herself. Not the royal. Not the perfect image. Just herself, a woman trying her best. She took a deep breath and whispered, "I'm still learning. But I'm not pretending anymore." Outside, the city lights of London sparkled quietly. The world was still moving, but something inside Kate had changed forever. She now knew that being a princess didn't mean being perfect. It meant being real. And realness was what the world needed most. From that day forward, Kate carried herself differently. She still smiled, still waved, still wore elegant gowns. But behind her smile was truth. In her voice was courage. And in her heart was a promise to always speak with honesty, no matter the cost. Because on that one unforgettable night, in a silent room full of strangers, Kate Middleton had discovered that the most royal thing she could ever be was human.